What if your entire destiny, your looks, your mind, even your chance to live a normal life, was already doomed before you took your first breath? Because generations before you decided royal blood must stay pure. In gilded palaces across Europe and beyond, kings and queens made a chilling trade, sacrificed the health of their future children to keep crowns on their heads. The result? Twisted family trees, broken bodies, and tragic souls locked in golden cages. This is not just old gossip from dusty portraits. It's real, raw, and sometimes horrifying. From a young queen forced to marry her uncle, to a royal baby so genetically fragile she didn't survive her first week. And even today, hidden corners of the world still repeat the same mistakes. Stay with me, because these are the 10 most inbred royal women in history, each story darker than the last. Number 1 will change the way you look at royal blood forever. If you love peeling back royal secrets no one wants you to know, hit subscribe, tap like, and tell me in the comments, which royal family do you think hid the most chilling secrets? Ready? Let's dive into these tragic tales and see what it really costs to keep a crown. Isabella II of Spain, the crown built on family ties. Imagine being born under velvet canopies and golden crests, yet your very bloodline is a ticking time bomb. Isabella II of Spain wasn't just royalty by birth. She was living proof of how far dynasties would go to protect power, even if it meant turning the family tree into a circle. Born in 1830, Isabella was the long-awaited heir of King Ferdinand VII, a monarch desperate to keep the Bourbon line strong. But behind the royal portraits of a baby swaddled in lace lay a troubling truth. Her parents were uncle and niece. Even more unsettling, on one side of her family, her grandparents were also her great-grandparents, a loop of lineage so tight that medical whispers about her health began almost at birth. Isabella grew up a porcelain doll in the Spanish court, groomed to rule, yet always fragile. At 16, she was married off to her double second cousin, another branch of the same family circle. 11 children followed, but heartbreak overshadowed the royal nursery. Only 5 survived infancy. Even then, scandal brewed in hushed corners of the palace. Rumors that her husband fathered none of the surviving heirs. Her dynasty, built on family purity, was quietly crumbling from within. In the end, Isabella's reign was short-lived. She was dethroned in 1868, a queen undone by the very ties meant to keep her on the throne. Her legacy? A tragic lesson that power secured by blood alone often comes with a hidden cost, a cost paid in heartbreak, frailty, and secrets whispered through centuries. And Isabella was just the beginning. Wait until you hear about the next woman, a princess handed over like a bargaining chip, whose family tree was so tightly knotted it shocked even modern geneticists. Ready to meet Marie Louise of Austria? Marie Louise of Austria, the bargaining bride. If you thought Isabella's tangled family tree was a royal nightmare, wait until you step inside the gilded prison of Marie Louise of Austria. Born into the infamously entangled Habsburg dynasty, Marie Louise's birth in 1791 was less about celebration and more about calculation. Her parents weren't just cousins. They were double first cousins, meaning they shared both sets of grandparents. Imagine having only 4 unique great-grandparents instead of 8. That's the level of genetic tightening the Habsburgs practiced for centuries, all in the name of power and legacy. And power demanded sacrifices. At just 18, Marie-Louise was handed over like a pawn to none other than Napoleon Bonaparte, her father's former enemy, the very man whose armies had once ravaged her homeland. Their marriage wasn't built on love, but strategy. Unite 2 empires, produce an heir, and solidify Napoleon's grip on Europe. Behind the embroidered gowns and imperial portraits, though, the reality was far less romantic. The same bloodline that crowned her empress also burdened her with frail health, constant fear of miscarriage, and a court that watched her every move like hawks circling a prize. When she finally gave Napoleon the son he craved, the boy too carried the weight of this pure blood, delicate, sheltered, and doomed to die young. Marie-Louise outlived Napoleon, but she never escaped her genetic legacy. She remained an empress on paper, but a hostage to the choices her ancestors made generations before she ever drew breath. And if you think that's unsettling, brace yourself for what's next, because this story of twisted bloodlines doesn't just belong in old castles. It echoes through modern times in ways you won't believe. Get ready to meet Lorraine Whitaker, a chilling reminder that inbreeding's dark shadow is not just royal history, it's a human one, still happening in hidden corners today. 3. Lorraine Whitaker, the modern echo of inbreeding's curse. If you thought royal palaces were the only stage for inbreeding's tragic consequences, think again. The story of Lorraine Whitaker is a chilling reminder that genetic entrapment didn't die with the crowns and castles of Europe. It lives on, tucked away in places no one wants to see. Lorraine was born in a tiny, isolated town in rural America, where generations of relatives married cousins and cousins married cousins again. She became the unwilling face of a modern cautionary tale, not for scandal or gossip, but because her life shows what happens when family trees loop back on themselves too many times. Documented in a now infamous documentary, Lorraine's Family, the Whitakers shocked viewers with scenes that seemed torn from a medieval nightmare. But this wasn't the Dark Ages. This was the 20th honest century. Poverty, isolation, and secrecy created a genetic echo chamber. Lorraine's health was fragile. Her mind struggled to develop, and she carried the weight of knowing her child, Timmy, is considered one of the most genetically affected individuals alive today. What makes her story so haunting is its ordinariness. There are no crowns, no royal decrees, just an ordinary woman paying the price for a family's generations-long trap. It's a brutal reminder that inbreeding is not just a footnote in dusty history books. It's a reality that hides in plain sight. And yet, even Lorraine's struggles pale in comparison to what happened in grand palaces when the cost wasn't just physical but mental. Brace yourself as we step back in time to Portugal, where one queen's mind slowly crumbled under the heavy burden of her family's pure bloodline. Next up, Maria, the Mad of Portugal, the queen whose sanity paid the ultimate price for the crown's obsession with blood purity. 4. Maria, the Mad of Portugal, a crown crushed by blood. Imagine wearing a crown so heavy that it didn't just weigh on your head, it squeezed your mind until it cracked. That's the tragic legacy of Maria, the first of Portugal, known by history as Maria the Mad, born into the Iberian royal circle in 1734. Maria was a child of generations of cousin marriages. Her parents, King Joseph I of Portugal and Maria Anna of Spain, were already the 16th pair in their dynasty to unite bloodlines that were dangerously close. From her first breath, Maria carried the burden of repeated genes and twisted branches of a family tree that looked more like a tight knot than a grand oak. Desperate to keep the royal line pure, she was pressured to marry her own uncle. Yes, her uncle. For Maria, this wasn't just a scandal. It was the final turn of the genetic screw. Half of her children died young, their fragile bodies unable to withstand the toll of repeated inbreeding. But it was Maria's mind that paid the highest price. As she aged, her mind began to unravel. Nightmares plagued her. Her mood swung from deep despair to irrational fear. And eventually, she was declared unfit to rule. The same nobles who once praised her piety now locked her away. A queen in title, but a prisoner to the madness that had been generations in the making. Her tragic decline reminds us that royal power was often an illusion behind gilded gates. Pure blood came at the price of pure suffering. But as dark as Maria's fate was, another royal tale takes us even deeper into the shadows. A woman whose bloodline looped back on itself so many times that her family tree became a genetic maze. She was the face of a dynasty that collapsed under its own obsession with purity. Get ready to meet Maria Louise Elizabeth d'Orleans, whose life reads like a Gothic tragedy etched in royal ink. 5. Marie-Louise Elizabeth d'Orleans, a royal Gothic tragedy. If you think royal life was a fairy tale, Marie-Louise Elizabeth d'Orleans would beg to differ. If only her ghost could speak. Born into the labyrinthine Bourbon bloodline, her very birth was the product of an uncomfortable family deal. Her father was forced to marry his own cousin, an illegitimate daughter of King Louis XIV himself. From her first steps, Marie-Louise's life was more Gothic novel than gilded fantasy. She was married off to another cousin, Prince Charles of Berry, sealing yet another twist in the tangled web of royal genes. But the cost? 3 children. None survived beyond childhood. Every loss was a dagger to her heart, but also a grim reminder that nature doesn't care about crowns or jewels when the same blood loops back on itself. Faced with grief, isolation, and whispers in dark palace corridors. Marie-Louise turned to the only comfort she could find: alcohol, records whisper. She started drinking heavily as early as 14 years old. Imagine a teenage princess lost in echoing halls, clutching a wine goblet to numb the sorrow that no crown could shield her from. Her decline was merciless. The more she drank, the more people gossiped, blaming her weakness instead of the generations of forced inbreeding that broke her spirit in the first place. In the end, she was remembered not for her royal duties or her beauty, but for being yet another piece in a family puzzle that was always one match away from falling apart. But if you think her story was tragic, wait until you meet the next one. A princess whose entire existence shows how even the modern royals couldn't escape the ghosts of the old bloodline obsession. Next, we'll step into the more recent past with Princess Alexia of Greece, whose family tree carried a double twist you won't believe. 6. Princess Alexia of Greece. The double-edged crown. Not all haunting tales of royal inbreeding are buried in dusty tombs. Some still breathe in our modern world, and Princess Alexia of Greece is living proof. Born in 1965, Alexia arrived in an era that believed such ancient dynastic tricks had faded into history. But in the halls of Europe's last true monarchies, old habits died hard. Her parents, Queen Anne Marie of Denmark and King Constantine II of Greece, weren't just blue-blooded, they were blue-blooded twice over. They were second cousins and third cousins, meaning their family trees tangled not once but twice. It was a royal match crafted for political unity, but the genes didn't care about tradition or titles. Look closer and you'll find a legacy just as knotted as the infamous British royal connections between Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, who, by the way, were themselves third cousins. For Alexia, the shadow of her family's entwined past isn't some distant myth. It's a reminder that the ancient obsession with keeping the line pure can still echo across centuries, binding modern royals to the same risks their ancestors faced. Through Alexia's story, we glimpse the final flickers of an era when marriages were chess moves and children were pawns in a game of dynastic survival. She's not a tragic figure like Maria, the mad or the broken-hearted Marie-Louise. Instead, she's a living monument to how close the modern world still stands to its inbred past. And that brings us full circle. From twisted bloodlines that birthed mighty empires to fragile bodies and minds that paid the hidden cost. These stories show that behind every sparkling crown is a family tree tangled with secrets. So, what do you think? Were these royal women victims of power or prisoners of their own blood? Hit that like button if you want more true, dark tales from history's hidden corners. Subscribe to Dirty Royal Secrets, because sometimes The truth is filthier than fiction. And drop a comment below. Which story shocked you the most? Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, the past is never as clean as it looks.